Greetings friends, weekend has come and it's time to talk some more about Alpha 21 for 7 days to die. While I've covered the development state of the game last week, this week I wanted to touch on features that I think are really needed for the game. Things that I feel would fit well with the game context, would add enjoyment to players, and are of varying levels of complexity to implement. I'm going to focus on 3 areas. But before hitting into the meat, well, maybe it's rotten meat, it is a zombie game after all, of the video, I'd like to express my appreciation to all of those of you who view, who hit the like button, who subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, and engage in discussions in the comment section. It's great to hear people's views and thoughts of this wonderful game. Let's start with some of the easy and low-hanging fruit, well, content. Vehicles. While the Fun Pimps have repeatedly stated that they do not want to add just cosmetic vehicles that aren't really different than what's currently in the game, they have indicated a willingness to look at new types. So for instance, we are unlikely to ever in vanilla games see more motorcycle variants or normal cars because we already have the 4x4 for instance. What the game does need are expansions in 2 areas. Firstly, we need a water vehicle, or maybe 2. The game actually has had a raft model in it for ages, and I've even in the past covered a mod which enabled it, allowing people to sail around. Here you see me in a boat, and while it's not perfect, it looks like it really wants to head underwater and be a submarine. It does the trick of allowing it to traverse water bodies. Modders have been able to mostly add water vehicles, but they do have some issues due to having to sort of hack in this water physics and floating vehicles. The Fun Pimps did state that a working raft, if I recall correctly, was about a weekend's work, and that was back in Alpha 20, so more than a year ago, and I strongly urge them to take the time and finish this off for Alpha 21 because it never made its way into Alpha 20. The second vehicle expansion is in the air. We do have the gyrocopter, which some like, some hate it. It is however quite a basic flying vehicle and it only seats 1. What we need is a proper helicopter. Now I'm not talking about an Apache gunship or something, which I've also shown a mod for, complete with rockets that you can fire for devastating effect, but simply a helicopter you can use for moving around the map as a team, with your squad, carrying resources, and as a true endgame vehicle. I know in many of the servers I run, towards the end of the game, we generally try to get a helicopter because it makes it so much more enjoyable to go adventuring as a team. Everyone together rather than slowly and painfully driving across maybe a big map to get to that wasteland or snow city we're aiming for. End-game content progression which wouldn't unbalance the game either. The only 2 reasons why we wouldn't get this in Alpha 20, and it would be pretty much down to the Fun Pimps feeling that it's not important, or mods can already do this. As to importance, fleshing out the game is always needed, especially where there are gaps. When it comes to mods doing it, while it is true, it's equally true that they're all client-side mods, which basically forces players to install these mods on your client as well as on his servers, which is a terrible experience. It needs to be in vanilla. Now on to more complex additions. We're going to be talking about bandits. This is something which the community has been waiting for literally years. It has been talked about, teased, and pushed forward. Delayed again and again, and with a gaming studio with some 50 people working on the game, that must be beyond embarrassing. Modders introduced NPCs such as bandits a long time ago. We've had basic bandits, we've had actually even friendly NPCs helping to guard your base and so on from at least Alpha 15 that I played with. I do miss Starvation mod. And yet, the Fun Pimps as the game developer has not been able to make it work. We see other games by solo or duo developers introducing NPCs just fine. Miss Survival years ago had both bandits to fight and NPCs to recruit who would help you craft and defend your base. V Rising has them defend your base or be used in missions to go gather resources and so on. While bandits are by no means trivial, after 10 years in early access, it is a core feature that really should have been out at least in the first version, and the fact that it's not is frankly disappointing. The somewhat good news, however, is that versions of bandits have been in the game for many years, be it Alpha 15, 16, 17 and beyond, with various levels of functionality. In some versions they could walk and talk, some they would shoot and melee but not talk or maybe not walk, and some they could get killed and some they could not. And while it is not a confirmed feature for Alpha 21, they have stated that effort is underway, so we might get lucky. Unfortunately, it is a feature which has been pushed and delayed for years, and I wouldn't get overly excited until we see in the development diary that this is confirmed as a feature. Right now, it's not. For the third and last area, I'm going to dive into, well, it's actually two, but they are generally connected. It's the overall electricity system and traps. While electricity was added back in Alpha 16, that's years and years ago, and it hasn't seen any significant updates or upgrades. Yes, we have gotten power doors and drawbridges, powered hatches, and that's great, it's really good. It's also been added years ago. Essentially, it's the same as we had in the beginning. No new trap types. I think for a horde crafting game which has been described as being a tower defense game, having so few trap types is a terrible design choice. Dart traps, blade traps, electric fences, and 2 shotgun turrets, and that's it. We were teased other traps in the beginning. A flamethrower trap which even had a model you could put down if you enabled it in the XML, though there was no code associated so it didn't actually work. And there was a piston trap that was teased, but neither made it to production and no other traps were ever introduced. Night of the Dead is made by a super small team. To contrast, for instance, it has a huge array of traps. You start with simple spike traps, you go through your crushers and pushers, squishers and bruisers, going all the way to ballistas, trebuchets, multiple rocket launchers, mortars. All this at higher levels can be controlled by fire control functionality as to whether to target normal, medium, or heavy enemies. I mean, think about those giants. 7 Days to Die really needs more of this. We need more trap types. We need more reasons and ways to build our base defenses with an expanded electricity system which allows for logic gates, specific targeting. I mean, it could be just normal zombies, ferals only, radiated, or maybe even down to specific zombie types, maybe only demos, for instance. Considering we can make targeting AI for turrets which tracks and can differentiate between human allies, non-allies, or zombies, it's not really a stretch that this should be doable even in-game with the lore. Heck, we made an AI for a drunk drone that can follow us around and can tell whether we or the allies are injured and then heal us. Adding more of this as endgame content would go lengths towards improving the progression and giving people something to do and look forward to as they move through the game. A very common issue raised by people is that there's simply no real endgame. I'd argue even mid-game is really hollow, and adding more of this as a progression would make people play it more and enjoy it more. The fact that modders of the game and even small indie developers are able to pull this off really means the Thumbpimps have no excuse for not being able to get through it. Unless of course they feel that what's in the game right now is good enough and it just needs some tweaking with limited things added so they can call it a day and declare the game is finished. This is a possibility, but I would argue that doing so would be finishing on a low note rather than a high note, with people deciding that the climax they were anticipating for finished game was actually just an anticlimax, and greatness that could be seen in the distance was but a mirage. But what do you think? What does the game need, not just for Alpha 21, but in the future? Let us know in the comment section below, respectfully of course. I do of course realize that not everything has to go into Alpha 21, but after 10 years of development, saying not now without making incremental progress towards it just pushes it forward until it really never happens. No one claims they need to add 20 trap types for Alpha 21, but adding 2, maybe 3 would be greatly needed. Bandits don't have to be perfect. If they can spawn in a bandit POI and defend it against players, maybe even exist as a wandering horde passing by the player, all the better. But we need some of it in the game to experience, to provide feedback to see what works and does not work. With the constant reworking of systems, we're looking at you crafting and skills and looting, it's clear that multiple iterations and feedback is required, and there's no better time to start than yesterday. If the Thumbpimps spent as much effort on these systems as they have on all the graphic updates, we'd already had these systems in before today.
Special thanks to the great patrons supporting the channel. If you would like to join the vetted community and support these videos, do follow the Patreon link.